We are live. It's just me today. No Elijah. And we're streaming on a Monday because, well, we're doing office hours on Monday. We will also have office hours on Wednesday at our normal time. Back to our normal schedule, but we didn't do office hours last week because I was traveling and it was just too hectic. So Jeff and I said, hey, let's just jump on today and answer some questions from the class that we just haven't gotten to. So
how was Chicago?
So anyway, Chicago was great. You know, one thing I learned about it was that, I mean, I think I knew this somewhere. I had a sense of it, but I didn't really have a sense because I've been there a couple of times but didn't pay attention. But how much architecture is woven into the history of Chicago. And was really one of the cutting edge cities in the U.S. and maybe the world, actually, in terms of architecture in the early part of the 20th century. And man, it's just so fascinating. Really, really cool buildings, lots of experimentation that happened. So that's pretty cool. Here, what did I learn? Talked to a lot of police officers. They're not fans of the National Guard coming to Chicago. So these are not, they're not fans of that. And everyone said, we're not going to work with them, partner with them. There's nothing that we can do. First off, we're police. There's something else. So that was kind of interesting. It wasn't the kind of impression I got was from each one of them, the sense of it. And is kind of more of an eye roll thing. Like, oh man, oh, God. Yeah. All right. So anyway, but it's kind of a non-issue for them. So it's really interesting to see these kinds of conversations that happen globally, even, but certainly nationally and in some ways globally. And, for example, when Laurie and I would tell people, oh yeah, we're going to Chicago, the first thing is, oh, National Guard. Well, you'll see the National Guard. It becomes this big story. And there, it really wasn't a big story, and certainly not among the police. But there were a couple protests that we witnessed against the National Guard, even though they weren't there. But okay, so anyway, let me see, what else did we learn? One thing that I'm always reminded of when I travel to a place like Chicago, okay, here, hang on, let me preface this by saying the following. I got a couple messages from people like, oh, going to Chicago. Okay, don't get shot, right? Stay safe. And I'm reminded of how, especially when you fly over the city, coming in any direction, but we flew in and out during the day, so we really could see the city well. It's a big, massive expanse of land that constitutes the city of Chicago. And the violent parts of Chicago are really very small sectors of land kind of dotted around certain areas. And that's really important because, it's like the headline is, 9 people killed over a weekend in Chicago, and that would imply the city of Chicago. But Chicago is a massive place, and the violence, when you read through the headlines, the violence is very isolated. So, that's just one of those things that we can tell ourselves again and again and again. But it's hard to really hold it in our minds, to stick with that. A single plane crash is really big news. And of course it is big news, but at any moment right now, I mean, there's so many airplanes in the air, in the sky, around the world, at any given moment. Right. So, it's just, I don't know. It's just a thing, I try to live my life by the numbers. But it's a very difficult thing to to both remember to do and to do. But anyway, so it was good food, good met some great people. Yeah. And yeah. I had another story, but I won't tell. Hey Jeff, let's get to some of the questions from class.
Sure. So we're going to start off. This is class 1, which is your titled My 43rd Year. It was the intro to the course, gave the basic information, and then we also did our first case study. There weren't any questions that were submitted on the live stream, but there were comments that were posted in the comment section afterwards. And so I have a couple of them for you. This person, Kat, and then I think it's 5 zeros. They responded to the question that we put as the Social 19 channel, which is, what is a topic or case study you would like us to explore this semester? And her response was, what are the stereotypes of my ethnicity? Am I a stereotype? What do I do personally to break any negative stereotypes of my ethnicity? Those types of topics.
What's her ethnicity?
I'm not exactly. I don't know from her comments, but I just think that they would want to explore those questions with the students.
Oh, I see. Okay, I got you. Yeah. What would it? Oh, yeah. Me actually asking it that way. That's kind of cool, actually. Hey, you know what? That's actually really cool. I'll do that. We'll do a class on that. Yeah, that's very cool. Okay. Kat,
right.
Thanks. Yeah, that's great, man. I love when other people do my work for me.
Becca commented and said that they're a local Toledo, Ohio resident. This information makes me appreciate Dr. Sam even more. I love to listen and learn to understand. That's why I thoroughly enjoy his class/lecture discussions. My dad always told me, don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out. I'm grateful that Dr. Sam is teaching this generation how to think, not merely what to think.
Listen, man, your brains fall out. Hey, maybe that's what happened to me, actually. My brains fell out. Yeah, I like it's less. I don't know. Well, what I'm doing tomorrow, actually, tomorrow's class is going to be really cool. I'm mostly finding myself wanting to ask questions I just want to find out what students think, truly. But one thing that happens is, I think it was in the second class, maybe the third class, somebody commented on the video that, hey, that I'm talking too much, and maybe it was last Tuesday's class. And I think the one thing I'm trying to do this semester is actually talk a little more like office hours, where I'm just really responding to questions and I'm trying to say a little more. But in any case, that's cool. Teaching people how to think. Yeah. Or just, so asking them questions, and they're sort of thinking out loud, which is them learning how to think. Yeah. All right, Jen. Oh yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool, man. I like that. Rote memorization. I thought rote memorization is impossible because she has epilepsy. Okay, that's intense. That's really interesting because Laurie has epilepsy, and because of the drugs, she's not taking medication now, but she was for probably like 30 years. And the drugs, this one medicine in particular to stop her seizures, had a real impact on her memory. So over the years, that was a real, not quite I wouldn't say a disability, but I would say bordering on it in some ways sometimes. She learned by integrating knowledge into your genetic memory. Yep, that's kind of interesting. I would say that Laurie did that very much. Pretty much, I have my memory as lived experience with a feel to it. You know how people should learn. I appreciate you more than you know. People don't take things like this seriously until their brain stops creating long-term specific memories. That's so interesting. man, so you really, you have to. So Jen, God, I hope she somehow hears this, but it's like you have to be really comfortable being flexible in the moment with the ways in which you're thinking about things around you, the things that you see and sense and can touch and observe, right? Yeah, that's really intense. It's cool, man. It's so interesting. I will say that when her memory was the most impacted was when she was actually also the most creative. No, it's when it's not when she was the most, because she's been creative since then, but it's when her creativity really emerged, because it was very much in the moment. Like when she was studying for her PhD qualifying exams, comprehensive exams, she was reading novels, which is like, wait, are you you have a reading list, right? You gonna get to that? Yeah, well, whatever. And her brilliant, she just used all that information in the world. It's pretty cool. All right, Virginia commented on full lecture. I am like the girl's grandma, 53 and MAGA light, classical liberal. Was in Milroy this past week. Wanted to drop in to fangirl. You should have dropped in, Virginia. You really just stop in, man. There's always seats in the class. It's just, if you ever stop in, make sure you just let me know after class or before class, whatever, that you're there. Yeah, it's really good. MAGA light. Yeah, I think a lot of people actually are MAGA light. Some very light. And I think a lot of it is that, well, first off, the more I speak with conservative Republicans and so many people who voted for Trump, it's almost like nobody really likes it. No one likes his personality. Well, they like the sort of brazenness and his willingness to, just speak and be unfiltered, which is kind of refreshing. Except for some of the things that he says, it can be really awkward and frustrating, but nonetheless, but so many people don't like that kind of braggadocio. How do you say it? Braggadocio? The that self uplift kind of stuff. But people want some kind of change. And unfortunately, it's what I said in class on the second day. It's like, well, to the one student, it's like, well, yeah, people get hurt by these changes, but people always get hurt by change. It doesn't matter who initiates the change, because something is going to hurt somebody. It's like you squeeze the balloon on this side and it pops out on this side, and you squeeze it over here and it pops out on here. It's just the nature of it. So, mind you, right now there's an exceptional amount of change, and so we're seeing a great amount of disruption, both here nationally, but also internationally. Much more disruption than we typically would see in these. But nonetheless, people have a feel that they want change. I also have this idea. Increasingly, I'm having this idea that people, I don't know, like I always have this idea. Things are mostly pretty stable in the world. I mean, in life, right? Like it's like, look, people get along quite well, right? It's rare that we see people fighting and arguing and so on, right? I mean, if I walk down the street and I go into work environments, I go into stores, I go here, I go there, people are mostly getting along quite well. And they're, whatever. They're at the very least quite tolerant of one another. So there's not a great deal of fighting and conflict, well, so once again, we have to be reminded of that, there's a lot of racism in the world. Well, yeah, there is, but it's relative, right? There's also not a lot. But in any case, I think that with regard to, what was I saying? Oh, yeah. Dang, I don't even remember what I was saying. Oh, Jeff, do you remember what I was saying?
You told Virginia to stop by, and then you started talking about
MAGA light.
Yeah, the MAGA light and the classical
MAGA light,
liberal.
yeah. I got people. So people want change pretty quickly, but I don't know. Really, if we go back pre-Trump, let's say, and we say, okay, listen, go back to 2015. It's like people say, oh, the system's not working. It's like, well, what's not working exactly? Like, what isn't working? Like, really, what's the problem? And how would you fix that problem without creating other problems? And I think that there's a narrative that the things aren't working and things are falling apart. And it's like, well, how much is that true? And how much is it just a narrative that, that we grab onto, and I wonder that myself. I mean, I can say, well, okay, personally, I think it's largely a narrative that people grab onto. Because when I would ask people anyway, like, well, tell me exactly what's working. The things that people would say and did say back in 2010 to 2015, whenever, right, kind of leading up to this new shift, things that they would say would be the same things they would say forever. That people have been saying since I have become aware, So it's like, well, nothing. What has really changed that much? That calls for a need to turn the system on its head, so to speak, right? But I don't know. I mean, certainly some areas of life that okay, turn the system on its head. But understand, when you do that, you really shake up it's like one of those little snow globe things, and you shake it up, and it's like, well, the snow's gonna fall down and come down in different places. All right, what do we got? Craig commented on, imagine that, being a liberal and talking to a conservative instead of screaming at them. Yeah, or vice versa, being a conservative and talking to a liberal without screaming at them. Yeah. MAGA America first doesn't mean we hate people. We just need to care first for our country and then others. Yeah, that's it. I mean, most people, regardless of where they stand politically, don't hate people. I mean, they're not driven by hate. Like, man, there's a righteousness that can look like that, or maybe border that a little bit, but yeah, most people aren't driven by that. All right, rant. That's a great username. It's interesting that whites are allowed to all be different and have different opinions, but the common view is that all minorities think the same. Well, here, let me flip that around. Actually, people who are not white will often have the idea that white people all think the same also. And that we'll think that, Hispanics or Asians or blacks or native peoples will, if they spend a lot of time, a disproportionate amount of time among people who are like them ethnically and in terms of ancestry, ethnicity, and so on, then they'll think that they'll see the complexity in all the different ways in which they think. And they'll think that the other groups are all, monothoughtful, are thinking largely the same. So the same is true from that reverse angle. Yeah. But it's also common to have that, All right, man. So what do we got? Hey, Jeff, by the way, I'm not able to look at these and look at the chat at the same time. So if there's something in the chat you want me to respond to, let me know. All right, so let's go with
SG said that they escaped from Bosnia to get away from their ethnic, religious, and cultural tensions. The U.S. is making the same mistakes by allowing politicians and activists to exploit people's superficial differences. Sad.
Yeah, hey, listen, man, go to the Balkan region, and if you study what happened after Yugoslavia, fell apart. And you see how politicians really used the potential wedges between people, or latent fears that like had really kind of died down. It's like a fire that really died down, like Christians and Muslims, and man, you just see how these politicians came and like nationalism stoked those fires, and people just they fall victim to it. Oh my God. It's very unfortunate. And everybody thinks that it's not them, but it's not. It's like, look, well, it's not me, or I would never do that, or I wouldn't be a victim of that. But, I just read a little bit ago, Supreme Court temporarily anyway, has given the ICE the power to just randomly stop people for no cause whatsoever in Los Angeles. In California, the lawsuit was for the Los Angeles area, and a judge had barred them from doing that, and the Supreme Court just temporarily gave ICE the ability to do that. Now, you might say, like, well, what's the problem? These are undocumented people. But listen, man, what that means is here's an arm of the government, a militarized arm of the government, right? Immigration and Customs and Patrol, and to this really being fueled by the president of the United States, right? And he has been controlled by and moved by in very profound ways, right? Directed by, that has the ability to stop anybody who they suspect, and this suspect could be whatever they want, in public spaces, and to question them. And if they don't have documentation, which, how many people walk around without documentation, and detain them, right? It will increasingly, so many people I know who look Hispanic, for example, are walking or they have documentation on them all the time, just in case they get picked up. But the point being, like, whoa, we have this militarized arm of the government that can do that. It's like, whoa, hang on a second. It's like, on one hand, I don't think about it. It's like, oh, well, yeah, because you sort of walk into it. And then I stopped earlier when I saw the headline, and I went, oh, and then I went, whoa, hang on a second. That seems like it's not a good idea. Like how that could just spill over into one thing and another thing and another thing. And like, I don't know, man, yeah. Anyway, so SG, yeah, we watch it happen elsewhere. I watch it happen here. Anyway, that's a thought. So you might have a lot of different thoughts on that. But anyway, I had that myself, thinking, man, I just don't know about this. I have a lot of other thoughts. If I'm not on the stream public, I'm giving you really the best of my balanced approach. I have actually other thoughts on it. I could go deeper into why it's not a good idea, but I'm going to get on to other questions. But just leave it right there. Just think about it yourself. It's like, is that where we want to be? Like, because you go from there. You open one door and you walk through that one. Well, there's a series of other doors that now you have access to. So we'll walk through another one, and then walk through another one. And this is, of course, what happens. It's like, it's a slippery slope. And yeah, that's life. All right. So Axel says, believe that a young mind needs time to process information. Do you think that websites like TikTok, YouTube are guilty of speeding up the information flow that we all get? Yeah, it's not guilty of it, but definitely, absolutely. What do you think of us putting a self-imposed speed limit for young? Oh, man. That's so interesting. Yeah, well, I think the genie's out of the bottle, so to speak. The cat's out of the bag. I don't know which metaphor is the one to use. There's no going back to it, but that would probably, I don't know what it would look like, but it, again, you give an example, but it could look like a lot of different things, but, yeah, maybe so. But it is kind of crazy, man, to see how quickly things are happening. How do you leave the box you were born into? So here's another one from Axel. With Peter, how do you leave the box you were born into? In reality, we're all born into multiple boxes. When do we leave some, stay in others, stay in our boxes, or leave them all? Yeah, you just I start with the basic assumption that I'm not very different from everybody else. Okay. As much as I might like to think that I'm unique and I'm special and the way I think about the world or I see the world, it's not like everyone else. Well, mostly it is. And I'm in most of the boxes that other people are in, or every box I'm in, I have other people in here with me. So I start there with the assumption that I'm sort of kind of not locked inside, but I'm in these boxes. And, it's probably I should just work as hard as I can without being too overly conscious about it, to step outside and see if there are things that I don't see and haven't seen about living and about life and about, So, it's like going back to the thing with ICE and being able to, just randomly stop people. It's like, my reaction to that being like, I'm not sure that's a good idea. And then I stop and I think, hang on, well, why not? Let me think about this. What's the problem? You're just stopping people. If you have your papers and everything is fine, like, well, what's the problem? It doesn't matter. And then I think, well, what's the problem with the government knowing how many guns people own, right? In each house. It's like, what's the problem with that? And we can go to the Constitution. We can look at there are all sorts of things. It's like, well, what's the problem actually? Well, it's the Second Amendment. I got that. But what's the problem with the government knowing how many guns you have? It's like, why does the government have to know? It's like, well, because people want to know, and neighbors want to know, and people have a right to know that. It's like, well, why do people need to know if I'm a citizen? If I have if that person over there walking down the street has their papers and is a citizen, what's the problem with if you're legal and you're here legally? Like, well, why is that a problem? It's like, well, it's not a problem, but like, what happens when the searching turns into something else? What happens when the government does something about wanting to know how many guns we have? What happens when it's like, well, we're not just asking you about this one thing, whether you're here legally, but we're going to probe a little further into your life. Well, how do we know? And what are you doing here? And why are you? I mean, you could just go on. And suddenly people are, I don't know, it's a thing, right? We see how this turns out poorly in so many places. So I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out. I'm just like, I don't know that my logic holds up there, but I'm just, trying to be as thoughtful as I can, recognizing that these things are complex. So a lot of people commented on Office Hours number 2's comment section. Thanks you for finally having a conversation with each other. We've been wanting this for a long time.
Sorry, that was a typo. It's for Office Hours number 1. It was the Peter Boghossian conversation. So a lot of people were thanking you. A lot of people were saying, we've been wanting this for a long time, or I followed each of you guys. It's so great to have the conversation. There were a lot of people. And so then the next slide, I put question for you, the chat and the comments. Who should we have for Office Hours or in class? And what podcast or YouTube channel should Sam go on as a guest? I just wanted to ask you all that because a lot of you wanted to have Peter Boghossian, and we made it happen. Let's see who else we can try and get. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Alan, comment is, I have such a markedly different life, walk, and faith than either of these men, but I love their attitudes, fairness, open minds, and gentle curiosities. Oh, that's pretty cool. Have seen them both in long format individually, and this conversation is awesome. I agree with Peter. This is what we need to do to save the West. Yeah, okay. That's cool. Semper Fi, man. All right. That's cool. I like that. All right. Daniel commented, the idea that Penn State is 25% liberal, 50% independent, moderate, unsure, 25% conservative. Is there any data to support this? Yeah, from my class, my class is a cross section of students, and when I do surveys of my class, so it's 800 students. It's a cross section of the university, and it's really people take my class who are on the right, on the left, all across the spectrum. So that's basically what I see. And speaking with other professors, it's what we see with them as well. I found the next comment suggesting the East Coast is more heterogeneous to be curious.
Yeah, keep going.
Particularly in the Northeast, just curious if there are data. I don't know if I said that. I don't think I would say that.
I think that was a comment based on something you joked that we were different over in the East Coast. Ideologically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's not the East and West Coast. It's not the heterogeneity, so to speak. It's just that there's a certain way of thinking, and especially in Oregon, around Portland, and where Peter was. Yeah, for sure. But not in grandiose ways.
It would be cool to see how if we could replicate that survey every few years. It'd be cool if we could just do that for a few minutes. And it's also interesting because for Social 19, a lot of that 50% might be also because there are a lot of international students, and their left and right, so to speak, is not the same as left and right of America. So I don't really know where I go because I'm kind of in the middle, or our left is more your moderate, or our right is more of your moderate. So
yeah, but an equal number of international students support Trump. As
for sure.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Okay, so the MAGA class. Stephen from the UK. Stephen asks, "What do MAGA supporters think when they say great in America, great and make America great again?" Yeah, what do you think the international community thinks MAGA and Trump? Yeah, that's actually. I think that a lot of people. Students would be a little bit different, but I think a lot of people have a lot of different ideas on that. Nobody's thinking, even though people get criticized for this, nobody's thinking about, well, we were great back when we had slavery, and we were great back when we had Jim Crow laws on the books and so on. People aren't thinking that. That's just not part of the equation. There's just this idea that somehow things were better in the past, for example, when you could buy a middle class, moderate valued size home with one person working and one person staying home, and things, you were able to buy a new car every number of years if you were middle class kind of thing, but even working class, you work at where I grew up in Toledo, you work at one of the automobile factories, and you, or Libby, the glass company. I mean, any number of factories, and one person needed to work and bring home the money. So that's kind of the idea, that there's something in the past that was just better, than things just have gotten more troubling and more problematic. Well, and they have, but but one thing that's really important is, when I started teaching Social 19 35 years ago, when I would show data on poverty around the world, and the number of people that went hungry every night, man, they went to bed hungry, which was 15 to 20% of the world's population, right? Well, that's not the case. We've gone very far to eradicating some of the worst impact of poverty around the world. And so, it's like, all right, well, we've globalized, right? Like a lot of the manufacturing and a lot of jobs and so on, they went elsewhere. That's why you can buy things so inexpensively, right? That's why you can, you lose your remote control on your television and you can buy a replacement for $15 or something, you think, how is that possible? I can just send away, ship, go on Amazon and they have one shipped to me for $15. I mean, all sorts of stuff, right? That's why, because we've globalized. So people get hurt and people benefit. And it's just like, in the MAGA class number 2 with the students, like, well, people are hurt by Trump's policies. Well, people were hurt by Biden's policies and Obama's policies and Bush's policies and so on and so forth. And so that's just the nature of it. So, yeah, it was great. It was better at a certain time. Well, yeah, but it's much better for other people elsewhere in the world. And it's much better for some Americans because of the things that are worse for other Americans. That's the nature of how this stuff works, man. And so Stephen, when people say make America great again, it's just some idea in their minds that like something was better, even though I'm not sure what that would be. You know what I mean? Okay. And the international community has lots of different thoughts about MAGA and Trump, and yeah, I won't go into that. But those were good questions for students. Okay, Paul asked, do you think MAGA will exist a generation from now, or will it end when Trump is no longer president? Well, MAGA will stick around, so to speak, but the idea of MAGA, I mean, that kind of thing, and it will be a symbol of Donald Trump, and no one's going to be able to pick that up. JD Vance is not, the people are not going to mobilize around him, man. He's not the next one, and there's nobody in the wings. You can't, the void. Donald Trump is a unique phenomenon that nobody's going to step into those shoes at all. And so that's just not how it's going to work. And so, yeah, MAGA won't exist except as an idea that's connected to Donald Trump. That's just that's my take on it sociologically. It is not, things are happening too fast in the world, man. There's just no way that movements are too quick. People move on. They go on. Okay, Alligator Alcatraz Mom asks, if America was never great or is not great now, why do people try to come into the country illegally, even though they might not go to prison border, or even why do people try to come? Because it is great comparatively speaking, and there's so many opportunities here comparatively speaking. Not that there aren't opportunities elsewhere. There's a thriving middle class in Mexico, for example. I gave the story a few weeks ago about being in Puebla and just watching the entire community come out every night and walk around the center square, parade around the square, actually, like, wow, amazing. Yeah, so people are coming for the opportunities. So it's not about great or not great. It's just, you come for opportunities. Okay, Royalty. Young lady hasn't lived long enough to even understand. Thank you, Sam, for encouraging how to think rather than what to think. Yeah, well, you can't. This is the thing, 18 to 20-year-olds. Let's just say 20-year-olds. We don't know, man. I've lived 65 years and I'm still trying to figure it out. So, yeah,
that's essentially what I commented back with.
Yeah,
and I just, there was a comment under that said something about the comment being snarky. So I do apologize if anybody thought this was a snarky response, but I mean, or if it came across snarky. But my point was essentially, I mean, to me, it's not that she's 18 or 19 or 20 or 21 and as an undergrad that she doesn't know all this information, although they don't have as much lived experience. But like that, man, to think that we know everything or think otherwise is also kind of crazy to me personally.
Yes. No, and me. It really, in the case of the students in class, it's to what degree do they or have they lived long enough to have a well-formed opinion about things or well-formed thoughts about it. And it's like, well, they haven't. That's just, my well-formed thoughts. My thoughts didn't start really taking shape until my mid-20s. So, it's like, yeah, we got time. All right. Anyway, Fred commented to me, the great in MAGA is back when America was 100% self-reliant, a time when we could make anything and grow anything, when we didn't have to depend on other countries like we do today. Well, yeah, but that part, Fred, I will say that part of America is gone, man. That's never coming back because we are now a globally interconnected economic and political world. And that's just how it is. And what's great is the fact that I can now buy a 60-inch television set for $300 and have it be flat screen and on sale at Best Buy. Now it's not a very good one, but most people wouldn't know the difference if they didn't put a good screen and this screen together and side by side. And that's pretty great that you can do that. So, and the only reason we can do that is because we're not self-reliant. And we were never entirely self-reliant anyway, but I think taking though your comment, the importance of it is that we were more self-reliant than in the present day. Yeah. But again, these are the benefits we get around the world. Something like 80% of the main ingredients in our fertilizers come from outside the United States. I think that they go onto our crops, so I think that's true. But okay, Big Doggy commented, I did not like Trump as a person, not at all. However, our nation was heading in the wrong direction on many fronts. This scared the crap out of many of us and caused us to vote for Trump based on the policies he will push. Yeah, I hear that. Again, I'm going to go back to we're going in the wrong direction on many fronts. That's fine. I'm not going to Big Doggy. I would just say, well, what are those fronts? And then let me offer a response as to why maybe that wasn't, or what the reason was that we were going in that direction. Because a lot of those directions were benefit. Well, I just gave one, a 60-inch flat screen television for $300, man. There you go. Like, well, it's the wrong direction. We send all our manufacturing abroad, right? Okay, well, then the 60-inch television costs you $1,000. How about that? It's like, no, I want it for $300. Well, it's going to cost you $1,000 because that's what it is. And of course, we don't have it anyway because we only have it because of the technologies that the world is sharing with one another. So if you want to go back in time, that's a different story, right? So anyway, the point being, there are a lot of fronts that people see as problematic, or there's a lot of areas of life. Then if you break them down, it's like, well, there are good things to all of that also. So not in every instance, but it's important to be fair.
I heard somebody say once that if you talked to me and I was a boss of a company and I was doing everything for all of my employees, you would probably say I wasn't a very good boss because I didn't delegate, and therefore I was probably slacking off on other responsibilities. And a lot like that, the United States has gotten into a position where we have $300 65-inch televisions at Sam's Club or Walmart or wherever, because we've been able to delegate the manufacturing of a lot of these other companies or a lot of these other products from other countries, so, and their companies. So like, for instance, every time that people talk about like, oh, we want to bring back manufacturing or we want to bring back like coal or anything like that, my first thought is, okay, so where are you going to put these positions? Where are you going to put these jobs? And are the people in those areas going to want those jobs? So like, if you look at Pittsburgh, I'm pretty sure people who work at Pittsburgh aren't going to want to lose their health insurance company job and would rather go back to the coal mines. I don't know about that one, man. But like, we don't need to, because we're in a position where we're able to not worry about manufacturing as much. Now, do we rely on other countries too much? That's, for me, that's the question. And where can we pull back? But just saying like, oh, manufacturing, or when we were able to make everything on our own, it's like, man, that's a fantasy world. Like, I don't think we could do that anymore.
Well, here, I don't think anyone's thinking that we're going to go back to that where we're completely not self-reliant.
For sure. That was a bit of an exaggeration. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is, but it's important because people will have the idea that even I'm saying that, and I'm definitely not saying that, but I think it's important. It's just important. These things are, all of the things that are a problem come with things that are beneficial. And that's what's so difficult to keep in mind. Right now, man, I'm reading about all these the soybean farmers in the U.S. that are just asking for assistance from the government, and now I'm like, wait, what a lot of farmers, not just soybean, but but I'm like, wait, hang on a second. Is that you want assistance? You mean you want welfare, right? Because we had a policy now that we put the tariffs up and people aren't buying certain things. And one thing they're not buying is soybeans. Okay, so the market here is crashing. You're crashing. Your whole business model is crashing. But this is a thing that changed. So somebody also in the United States is benefiting from this somehow, right? You're not. And so now, okay, so what do we do, right? Do we now uplift you? Because this is, like, well, why do we reach in and help you? Why not reach in and help somebody else who's been harmed by globalization, right? So, but yeah, this is the thing, man. You have this kind of rapid change. It's going to have positive and negative impacts all over, and that's been true, my whole life. Anyway, okay. Simple facts: if you have 0 Trump supporters that feel comfortable enough to speak up at volumes about the F in this school and classroom, you should really take that to heart, Professor. Well, John, I'm going to say the following. After you reject my statement, give it some deep thought. All right, here, I want to say the following about that. Clearly, in my classroom is different. That's why I teach class the way I do, right? Because people aren't afraid to speak up. In that particular day, on day 2, which is, I didn't give people time. I'm just like, hey, is there any supporters here? And like, we needed it. People weren't raising their hand at all for things. So I would have had to really just sit with it and people would have spoken up. But because I know that, 20% of my class, well, hang on, who voted for? It goes back to voting, probably about when we did the elections, last semester, I would say probably like a good 30%. I don't know what it would be, but 30 to 35% of the class voted for Trump, probably 30%. And then 40% Biden and 30% didn't vote at all. Of those who were Americans and eligible, right? If I had to guess. No, I mean, I know, I'm not just guessing, making this up, but we ask people, we do surveys. And I'm just not remembering the data exactly, but yeah, so it does say something about universities and the fact that people who are conservative and support Trump don't readily raise their hands, right? And this is exactly why I teach the way I do, because I'm aware of that. So, but I will also say that some of that, the fear of some kind of retaliation or something is often unwarranted. That I've never experienced conservative students getting shut down in my class, and when I ask conservative students about that in other classes, the vast majority who speak say like, no, I've not gotten the vast majority. It is rare that a conservative student has told me that they've been shut down somehow by the professor. they've gotten in arguments and stuff with other students, but or heated conversations about things, depending on the class. If it's like a small class on something, But yeah, it's just so in some ways, yeah, it's true that that's an issue. It's also true that it can be overblown. Certainly, according to my conservative students. Make America Great Again, to me, means economically great again. We don't build things like we used to. Okay, yeah, once again, right? We don't build things like we used to. We don't build those flat screen televisions, but we get them for $300 up at my Best Buy. I just saw one on sale the other day. So, yeah, so it doesn't. And okay, homes, the price of housing, but the price of housing is true all over the world. Is really high all over the world. There's nowhere that I've gone that local people who are making an average income can pretty easily buy a home, in cities and areas around the world, except in particular areas that are really not thriving. Like in Spain, for example, housing is expensive unless if you go to Huelva down in the very south west corner of the country. That, by the way, that's the port from which Christopher Columbus left Europe. If you go there, housing prices are pretty down because nobody are deflated because people don't want to live in Huelva. But that's anyway. Yeah. So that's
I just wanted to include this one as well because that was something that I saw over and over again. Was for people, it was back when economics were a lot better or just different than they are today. Because everybody at the time, they always, in my opinion, we've always seen the past as, it was always better. Like we talked about rose-colored glasses earlier. And I think the same is true with how we view the economy.
Yeah, because people also really struggled in the past not being able to buy the house that they want. I mean, again, I'm not downplaying that there are issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Excuse me. Anyway, so but it's really oh my gosh, that's allergy season, man.
Yeah,
but it's really important to look, there's a global question in things like housing and so oh my gosh. All right, man. How about the next one? Eva. I would like to answer the question, where would God spend? Okay, hang on, man.
You asked during class 2, where would Jesus spend?
Yeah. Where would he spend money? Yeah, I don't remember what that was. This is God has unlimited resources. He obviously has a different criteria. Where money is needed in the Bible, the church is often admonished to care for widows and orphans. Yep. Yeah. God would take care of things. It's interesting because, again, my work in South America, when in my young years, and my interest in all of my research in liberation theology was about church people inside the Christian church. Well, I studied the Catholic Church, the movement in the Catholic Church, but it was also true among Protestants who embraced this liberation theology movement and really had decided that the church wasn't being very Christ-like by spending inordinate amounts of money reproducing the powerful institution of the church itself. That in fact, what the church should be doing is following the vision of Christ, which is like a preferential option for the poor. That's what they used to call it, preferential option for the poor. And that's the liberation theology, to liberate poor people from the different parts of their lives in which they experienced oppression, whether it was hunger or lack of housing or violence from the state even. Or lack of education or the ability to send their kids to school, this kind of thing. So it was a really cool movement, and it's one that really tuned me into this connection that sort of the philosophy of Christian, or the Christian ideology or philosophy of Christianity, and the actual social change movements in the world, for dealing with people's material needs. It was cool. It met a lot of really pretty amazing people. So when I asked that question, I sort of asked it tongue in cheek in a certain sense, but I asked it in a provocative way to get people to think about, well, what would people do? Okay, class 3 Fahrenheit 119. What can we not talk about? Yeah. That's kind of cool. I didn't really get. In that class, we didn't in the end, I didn't really get the kinds of questions that I wanted or statements that I wanted. But I knew that I would have to. We just ended up having a conversation about other things, but it was cool nonetheless. Don't think only about the U.S. So this is Steven said, there's a big world out there that people can learn from. People need to open their minds to the outside world. You can learn something new. Yeah. Okay, Eric from Philly.
These first couple of posts are people responding to the prompt of the class, which is, what should we not talk about in class?
Yeah. Okay, we can't speak frankly about certain topics like misogyny and misandry. If it's a Bible-based patriarchy, nobody wants to touch it. Yeah, there's something that's kind of there. Yeah, it's hard. Well, even like just talking about misogyny, or just talking about anything related to that sounds like it's related to feminism per se. It's like people immediately have some kind of reaction to that, even though like feminism is just a radical idea that in most things men and women are largely the same, right? Most things, but what people will immediately go toward is like, well, but not in these other areas. No, but feminism is the idea that just start with the assumption that men and women are capable of doing most things in the world. Let's start right there, right? And certainly increasingly, and certainly all things related to thinking, planning, and all of that. So yeah. Anyway, but that's something. But once we identify it as something that's like got an ism connected to it, right? Then it's something that's harder to talk about. All right, Ian says, if everything is going to be interpreted as offensive to someone, every topic would be off limits. Yeah, that's right, man. That's a really cool idea. It's essential to discussion to steal your own arguments to bring clarity. Yeah. Yeah, that's actually really on point, man. Yeah, it's going to be offensive to somebody. That's the problem with my class. It's finding a topic. Look, just the mere fact that I just did a class called MAGA, right? Well, I can't do anything on the Democrats because there's nothing I don't have a word like even that. Well, we're actually going to have a class that's more related to that. But anyway, that would be offensive to somebody, why do you say MAGA? It's like, oh my God, like, come on, don't be offended by that. Okay, so Daniel responded to the prompt. I said, don't talk about gender, everything past the LGB and whether they're factually or logically from a rational perspective. Yeah, you can't talk about that. That's become increasingly something that's really hard to discuss. Yeah. Not impossible, but you got to, walk a fine line. Man, okay. Axel, why do conspiracy theories grow so fast in the U.S. like QAnon? All right, there's one. I don't think we can't talk about that. Students would love to talk about why that's the case. They'd love to have that conversation. Yeah, I think. Yeah, that would be cool. And I don't have an answer to that, by the way. I'd love to have that conversation. Let's see what people think. But I'm not sure that they do grow faster in the U.S. Actually, I think conspiracy theories in the world today of the WWW, the World Wide Web, I think conspiracy theories are growing pretty fast everywhere. It would be my gut feeling. And I think that, yeah, it's all. Tornado asked on the live stream, how do we uphold conventional morality in sociology while maintaining our own moral code? Whoa, man. Okay, that's a cool That's a really cool question. Like,
And
first off,
Tornado is in chat today, so they're watching live.
yeah.
They asked the same question again today. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really cool question. Well, here's the way I interpret that question. First off, I don't know what conventional morality is, but I mean, I look around me day in and day out. Okay, morality is, so let me define it. What is right? Okay, all things related to right and wrong and kind of good and bad. But I think I see ethics as good and bad and morality right and wrong. But that's only because in my mind I need some kind of graph to break it up, just so I can deepen my understanding of what it is, right? So that's how I've always done it. And that was my first book, or this book, that never got published. It was on the moral order. They never published it because, it just never did. All right, but in any case, okay, that's how I did it in that book. Okay, so first off, what is right? How do we think about right and wrong? And how do lots of people think about right and wrong? Let me take one. Like, how about just like factory farming, eating meat first off, right? How about just eating I'm looking at a squirrel outside my window, right? So I've had squirrel stew before. It tastes like chicken. Everything tastes like chicken. Kind of tough chicken, and there's not a lot of meat in it, but whatever, it is what it is. Actually, it's more like rabbit, kind of somewhere in between there. But in any case, okay, so eating meat, and then how about eating meat that's been harvested, that is the lifeless body of animals that have largely have suffered in life. These are not cows that are happily romping around in fields. These are cows that are stuck inside of this massive factory farm, and so it's just living in really horrible conditions. Okay, so there's people around me. Most people around me are perfectly fine with that. That doesn't strike them at all. Okay, so so that's conventional morality. Conventional morality here in my world is that it's okay to eat meat, eat the bodies of lifeless bodies of animals that have suffered. Okay, in an attempt to keep costs down. Okay, and to feed as many people, to produce as much as we can, and to keep costs down. Right, as inexpensively as possible. Be able to sell that hamburger or hamburger meat, whatever, to somebody so they don't get pissed. It's like the price of a hamburger's gone up too high, right? And so, okay, so we do that. And then maintain my own moral code. So how do I uphold that? How do we even live with that all around me? How do I support it? Or how do I just turn a blind eye to it, or just accept it? Or because sometimes I'm going to eat the same factory farm meat. I mean, I'm not hardcore to not do that. I don't buy it, but I'm going to eat it sometimes. That's just the nature of it. Okay, so I have to hold my own sense that, wait, that just seems really problematic and mean and wrong and immoral, like really wrong, right? To watch animals suffer like that. Like, we'd never do that if it were our dogs or whatever. We just never. If most people took a tour of factory farms and saw the conditions under which, like these chickens that are laying eggs and that are just have half their feathers gone just because of stress and because of like hitting in these tiny little cages, it's like people they'd be thinking about that when they eat their eggs, and they would not be easy to just go to the store and get a dozen eggs and then go home and make an omelet. It's just like most people would trip up because of that, and it would come back to them. So you could work to. Some people would just cut it out of their consciousness and never think about it, but most people would trip up, and some people would have a really, really difficult time. Okay, so that's the conventional morality that's okay. We can produce eggs like that. But now now I've got my own moral code. And so what do I do? And so as a sociologist, what I do is I think about, well, I'm part of this. I didn't create the world. I didn't do this. I didn't choose the world to be as it is. I didn't, my wife always says, we're born into this place with no operating instructions, right? So we're just really kind of on our own to make sense of it. And okay, so I didn't choose it. I have to live in it, and I have to live in it in a way that I'm just not struggling every single day, because I have this one life. I have the idea that it's not my only life, that I probably in some level will be reconstituted, but that's just my own belief. Someday I could talk about that, but how I got there. But I got to make sense of it. I can't struggle. I have to be aware. I can't just turn my mind off to like all of this over here. I don't want to look at it. I can't do that. That's not my role in the world. I don't have an ability to do that. That's why I teach in the way that I teach. That's why I teach at all. But secondly, it's why I teach in the way that I do. So I have to live in my community. And so I'm living in my community, and that means I have to accept and live within, hang on one second, a certain amount of this integration of factory farming into the whole food chain in social relations chain. I go to the house of a neighbor down the street a couple weekends ago, and because there's a little gathering for the neighborhood, and there's factory farm meat there that's available. I know it's factory farm because I just know it is. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to go in and be like, oh, this is terrible. Do you know where this meat comes from? And that kind of stuff. And it's like, and I don't want to have a negative feeling. I'm there and like, okay, well, there it is. That was a suffering, whatever. Well, first off, I don't know exactly what that particular animal, from which that meat was harvested or whatever is. But in my mind, I got to live. And so there it is. So anyway, tornado. That's such a really cool question. It's such a cool question. And I hope my answer, as I just kind of spun in lots of different directions, I hope it kind of makes sense. But that's how I deal with it sociologically. So it's always some kind of balance between my own thoughts and my own moral codes and fitting in with the world around me. Yeah, that's a really, really cool question. Okay, Great Lakes asked, when the professor says that illegal immigrants commit the least amount of crime, is he taking into account that being here illegally is a crime in and of itself? No, and I think I said that. I most often say that. I mean, look, aside from every breath that undocumented or illegal immigrants take, every breath they take is an act of committing a crime, right? The breath that they take here in this land. Yeah, so I'm taking that into account. But that's not what nobody's talking about that. When people talk about all the crimes being committed by people, undocumented peoples, they are not talking about all the breaths that they are taking. They're talking about the crimes they are committed. And most people in their minds are thinking violent crimes. And when they come up with it, if you say, like, what are you thinking of? They're thinking of some news story that they saw about some undocumented person or illegal person that gets plastered all over the news, which is horrific and terrible. And yet the fact is, crime rate is always the lowest. Okay, so do it that way you want, man. I don't know, but it just seems to me that as though that's just important to know, and it's important to acknowledge. And it just seems like I don't want to be dumb, myself, right? Like I want to be as thoughtful as I possibly can be. So basic facts like that are really important to being thoughtful. And then I can kind of move forward thinking about how I'm going to address something, Okay. Krenkin asks, I want to hear someone ask about how Americans are affected by illegal immigration. Most of the chattering class do not face the real effects. Yeah. That's right, man. That's oh man, I wish I would have had that. That's in the comments section, but if that would have been on the chat, that would have been a really, really good question to ask. Like what are the negative ways in which people in this country are impacted, citizens of this country, I should say, are impacted by illegal immigration? What and where are the effects of it? Yeah, my wife and I were arguing last night about this a little bit, and but like wage deflation is one. That's definitely one. And you deflate those wages. Yeah, that's how it is, man. So
that was our last prepared question. So just give me a few minutes. I'm going to go and see what the chat bot picked up for questions that we had from the beginning of this office hours. And in a minute, I'll have a question for you.
All right, cool. I think what's really important is people oftentimes, they'll watch, say, like my class, or it's really hard to imagine that somebody like me is not secretly holding on to some kind of information. Hang on. For some people, it's difficult to imagine. I have the feeling it's difficult to imagine that somebody like me is not holding on to some idea that they're not really sharing with the class, right? That I'm trying to push people in some direction to think some particular thing. And I have to, that's why I'm try to be so cautious and careful about how I say things, because I'm not actually, but there are things that are going to be true that people don't want to hear. Like earlier today, I talked about this in office hours I think I did a couple months ago, but Trump had this, there's like these Band-Aids, and that are made from people's, the cells of skin, right? And hang on, I'm gonna pull this up, and hang on, they're skin substitutes, okay? And anyway, for a long time, so there was this company that makes these skin substitutes, right? And they're human tissue-based products. So, people who have amputations and so on, they make skin out of these Band-Aids that made out of skin, and to help to heal the wounds very quickly, right? Anyway, there was this story about this company that gave $5 million to this gathering that Trump had, and so the CEO of this company, he got to spend a certain amount of time with Trump, lobbying for the importance of continuing to allow Medicaid or Medicare to pay for this. And it's really expensive. For a square inch, it could be like $5,000 or $10,000. And they were selling this, and so they got to speak to Trump directly, and they spent $5 million to be able to get an audience with him, 60 seconds, to be like, here's our flyer. Look at this. We really need to have this. This is such an important service to the world, right? Because the healing happens very quickly. You can imagine if you're spending like for a square inch, just like, $10,000 or whatever, right? Okay. So anyway, they got to do that. So it's like, okay, this is great, this company, right? And they made a ton of money. Their company has made a ton of money. So they're thinking everything is going really well. And then suddenly Trump in the final hour turns around and is like, no way. We're actually going to set the Medicare pricing at on average at $800 a square inch. It's going to go from $100 to $1,000 a square inch of what you're actually going to pay for. And so the stock of the company, the whole industry, it's like way up here. It's this really boutique industry. It just went right down. So even though they gave all this money to Trump and, and the Republicans and the Trump, God knows whatever it is, man, they turned around and were like, Trump turned around and was like, nah. We're not doing that, right? So you just like said, nope. And like, whoa, okay. How many people who hate Trump know, like, look, man, okay, would Biden have, what would Biden have done? You know what I mean? Because it's a lot of money where that $5 million came from, a lot more money will come. Well, but it doesn't matter what Biden did. Trump did that. Trump just said, no way, get lost, right? Okay, there you go. Like, well, the Trump haters out there, you get it. There are things that are happening that are only happening because this guy can just do what he effing wants to do, and is going to do some things that really go against what people expect that he's going to do. Now, is just as often, he's like every other politician, he's going to say yes to these things. You give him a certain amount of money and it's quid pro quo, right? But anyway, that's the thing. I just had that idea. Because I was reading that and thought like, okay, that's pretty cool. All right, Jeff, do you have anything?
Yes, give me 1 second. I was putting in somebody's location.
All right. All right.
And slideshow.
By the way, all right. What do we got, man?
So if you look at your if you look at the PowerPoint, you should see it pop up. But I have the office hours number 2 live questions section. The first one, we kind of already answered it. It was from Darkwing Duck, if you want to read that one, from Central Illinois.
All right. Wait, Darkwing Duck. Man, I love that. 3708, whatever that is. I've been watching on and off for a while now. How do you explain the perception that there are very few conservative voices in your class when you have volunteer students up in front of the camera? Yeah, well, that's why I try to push for, I try to really encourage students more conservative students to be in front of the camera. When I meet conservative students, when I see someone with like a Trump sticker, man, I'm just like, hey, did you apply to volunteer? Make sure you apply to volunteer. So there's no question that students are, but listen, here's the other side. This is going to be from class tomorrow. Students they overwhelmingly, young people who are my students, 60% of them think that, over 60% think that the government should spend more to help on people who are really impoverished, whether it's like food or housing or whatever it is, healthcare, that we should spend more money helping poor people. Whereas Americans, when you get to my age, that drops down to about 20% think we should spend more money. So it's like young people, they lean, and the people in my classroom, they lean much more in the opposite direction. They're like, hey, we gotta that's cool. Yeah, you can be conservative fiscally and so on and so forth, but still, no, you gotta help poor people, man. You gotta help people. They're not, it's like, it's just, that's what it is, right? And I always say, well, kind of in a way, I suppose that's what you would expect, that people are gonna, once you discover, I remember the first time I walked into a refugee camp when I was 26. And I remember, I will never, ever forget using the urinal that had been constructed in the refugee camp. Okay, I went in there. It was kind of like a tent, you know? And hang on, I got a blue jay, got to feed a blue jay. Peanut, there you are, blue jay. And I will never forget standing at the using the urinal and kind of looking around, and just that feeling that, and walking out of the urinal, and it was an open air, it was a trench for all of the sewage, right? So the shit and the urine and then people's food scraps and animal stuff, stepping over that in the smell, right? And by the way, this group of people had become refugees. This was in Costa Rica. They had become refugees because the Dole fruit company had lobbied the Costa Rican government and took over their land and kicked them off their land. A crazy story, but Dole Fruit Company, okay? And so this is, my company, a U.S.-owned multinational corporation. And that was the story there. And I was there with a religious group, right? And that had been operating in this camp. So these were very thoughtful, very Christian people who had also become very politicized. And, they weren't radical in their thinking. They were just telling the story as the story unfolded, right? So the U.S. corporation used its power to kick people off the land. Okay, so when you talk, for example, about let's make America great again, well, the great again, those deleterious, problematic things were happening around the world, caused by us, and caused by other people too. I mean, other nations did pretty rotten things also, but I'm just looking at my own nation, right? When it was great, and still is great because we're still doing stuff like that. In any case, when I was in that, I'll never forget being in that bathroom and just feeling that I had that I was never going to be the same, because in this refugee camp, like this was it. And there was a shower there, and it was sort of like, there's something happened. Okay. So now I say like, oh, okay. Right. We should fix this. We can fix this. We should, what money do we have to spend to fix this problem? Okay. Well, when you're young and you experience things in the beginning of your life, you see these very problematic things, you want to fix it. Like human beings should be able to stop this and fix it. Right. So it doesn't strike me as odd that students who are 20 years old would have this sort of optimistic, it's like, wait, we got to have enough money in the world to fix, and so they use their credit card, they go down to the bars and just pay for beer and put their credit card up there. Sometimes they go way into debt and they don't even realize it because it's their first time and they just think it's free money, and it's not free money. So, you're young and you don't have experience. So it's like, well, I'm young and I have an optimism, and I feel like we should fix this problem of these refugees or these million other issues out in the world. So it doesn't strike me at all that my students are more liberal in that way. But because I'm aware that there are very thoughtful voices of people who could speak up in my classroom and say, well, here's the problem with saying, like, yes, we should fix this problem with these refugees in Costa Rica, for example, and just come up with something, not mean and hateful or whatever, just come up with and I could come up with it. I'm not going to do it right now because that's not my point of this. But anyway, so that's why I'm very actively engaged at that level. So in thinking about that. All right. And by the way, once again, I really do want to emphasize that my conservative students tell me they're not shut down as much as these social commentators argue that the conservative voices are shut down in classrooms. I do not hear people with stories of how they got shut down. I have a few stories, but I ask all the time. I'm asking people all the time. And I just don't hear it. Then in fact, what I hear is the opposite. The professors are actually quite open to listening to them and want their contribution and so on. So anyway, just because people perceive something to be true doesn't mean that it's actually true. Just like crime rates, we all perceive the world to be far more dangerous than it is. All right, Reef reacts from Louisville. Have you been met with outside hostility while staying the course? Yeah, well, not outside hostility, but I mean, yeah, people think that I personally should be more one thing or another. Yeah, like, look, liberals, they don't want to be challenged. Conservatives don't really want to be challenged. You know, the conservatives, when conservatives listen to me and think like, oh, you're doing a great job, it's because what they're agreeing with is something that they mostly already agree with. They're not saying like, whoa, I had this idea and you completely blew my mind and now I'm having to think differently. That's mostly not what's going on. And liberals are in the same boat. They're mostly, they're like, yeah, I really love what you said about X, Y, or Z, right? This is really important. You need to keep making that point. And well, whatever it is something that they agree with. It's not like the opposite point, like, whoa, you completely, class said something that showed me how wrong I've been about a certain issue. And you should make sure you talk about that so that other liberals like me have an opportunity to change their mind. That's mostly not what people agree and disagree with. And for me, it's not what I'm inclined to do either, which is why I work really, really hard to, when I hear something that I'm just like, oh God, no. And then I'm going, wait, hang on. Why are you saying that? Go back in. And that's one of the cool things about doing what I do is that I really have to be honest with myself. All right, Karmic Debt from India. Yo, said hello from India. Yo, Karmic Debt. Man, thanks for watching in India, where it's very late, man. It's got to be like, dang, I don't know, 3 a.m. Ocam. Reductionism said, I have 2 questions. Have you met Glen Loury, and what's your favorite band? I have not met Glen Loury. I really like Glen Loury. I used a book of his. It was half his, actually, when I taught my race and ethnic inequalities class. It was a sociology, African American studies class back 20 years ago. I taught it for like 10 years. It was a senior level seminar. And I used to use his writing a lot. Well, my favorite, man. Okay, if I had to pick a band, if I'm on my deathbed, I'm going to listen to Floyd. Yeah, Pink Floyd. And it's going to be 3 different albums. Dark Side of the Moon. That's if I go out, if I have one final album to listen to, recording, it will be Dark Side of the Moon. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I Wish You Were Here and Animals are my 3 major ones. But probably my favorite, in terms of, here are my 5 bands, and there's no particular order. So Floyd, Steely Dan. Steely Dan's just Steely Dan, man. You can't. Yeah. Mana. And so if you like, Latin rock, Mana is like Mana, man. Man, I gotta think further than that. Let me just sit with those 3 for the moment. Yeah. Okay. Crash WG from New England. You see more left of center when teaching the class than you do during office hours. For example, I don't think I've heard you say illegal when talking about immigrants in class on purpose. Yeah, I will. I think maybe the left of center is because I'm trying to critique. Yeah, I don't know. I got to think about that. That's actually a really, really good question. No, I'm doing a class tomorrow on welfare. And then we're going to talk about what students are going to talk about welfare. So I know, let me see what happens there. That'll be a really interesting test for me. I'll try to keep this in mind and be really, really balanced. Illegal. I think that I talk about this a lot in class, right? The problem for me is that, you see, I have a lot of constituent groups that I'm constituencies who I'm speaking to at any moment. Okay. And it's always, there's lots of groups and lots of people and lots of voices and thoughts about things, right? Including the Native community. And I feel that I feel an obligation to always be thinking about Native Americans in the indigenous peoples, right? From their perspective, we're all illegal, right? And it's a pretty common conversation. People, it may be just in the back of people's minds, right? Because there are all sorts of, Native peoples are also, very, there are many, many different perspectives, right? But very common perspectives is, well, we need to start talking about illegal aliens or illegal immigrants. Like, you keep in mind, you're all illegal, right? That's pretty common. So I think that's always been in my mind, because when I talk to Native peoples, I'm always thinking about that, right? And I've had so many conversations with Native peoples here in the Americas about that. So in class, I think I'm just more cognizant, because it's an audience right there. I can see people, and then I'm just reminded, like, oh, hang on, don't be, undocumented, man. That's like, it's undocumented. It's not illegal. And so I think when I see people sitting in where they're sitting, it just helps on certain issues. It reminds me, it's like, whoa, keeps me centered and somewhere, wherever. And whereas right now I'm just speaking into a camera, like right there. And like, yeah, well, I can say undocumented or illegal or something. Now, mind you, it doesn't mean that it's like, look, man, life changes, right? What is now Germany today wasn't Germany, 150 years ago, right? Everything changes. Everything changes. All that is salad melts into air, as Karl Marx said. So it's like, well, yeah, Austria today, it wasn't Austria 150 years. It's just, that's the nature of life. And so everything changes. So yeah, it doesn't mean like, well, because indigenous peoples don't have a snarky response to people like me saying illegal immigrants. That doesn't mean that they're right, or that I should change the way I see the world because of that. But my obligation is to try to try to hold lots of perspectives together and be in this space of a balance between a wide range of perspectives. And so that's my job. That's what I try to do. So therefore, I'm going to hold that space, because it's the least I could do. American Native peoples, American Indians, we don't, just how quickly they're forgotten by everybody. Black people aren't thinking about, there's this BIPOC, right? Black Indigenous POC, BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color. Well, most Black people, they're not thinking Indigenous. They say BIPOC. You're not thinking Indigenous, man. You're talking about Black people, or you're talking about Hispanics, whatever you're talking about, but you're not talking about. It's not in your mind, Indigenous peoples. As you walk into your house that's been built on red land or native land, you know what I mean? So it's like, okay, but I'm holding as much as I can for as many people as I can. So that's why I will say things like that's a really long answer to a very simple question. So yeah, there you go, man. And it doesn't, I'm just doing the best I can. trying to hold so many things at the same time and balance. It's very, very difficult. Yeah. So anyway, Polish cha-cha fishing. Polish cha-cha fishing. What is Polish cha-cha fishing, man? Hey, by the way, in Chicago, lots of, Chicago's like little Warsaw, wow, so many, it's just the history of Polish people in Chicago. In Toledo, also where I'm from, but yeah, so we were going to go to a Polish restaurant, and in the end we didn't. But you seem more left to center when oh wait, we already said that. All right. Wait, Jeff, you took the wrong one. For Polish cha-cha fishing, you didn't get the right.
I didn't copy and paste it properly. Hold on, let me see what their question was. Oh, that was their question.
You let the spam around you, friend. Yeah. Yeah, man. Hey, I tell this story all the time about when I was a kid. There were a lot of Poles in Toledo. I don't have Polish in my blood. My wife her grandfather is 100% Polish. And her grandmother, on her mother's side, her mother's last name was Stipolkowski. So you don't get much more Polish than that. But when I was a kid, there were so many Polish people. We would say Polak, right? But later in life, you come to accept, well, yeah, you say Polacks. It's not pejorative, you know what I mean? But anyway, but if you wore black shoes and white socks, you would call someone a Polak, be like, you're a Polak, and because you didn't do that, right? Dark shoes, and dark socks. That's the nature of it. So anyway, when I was a kid, so that's what we would do, starting from a very young age. I mean, I don't even remember the first time I heard it, but I'm sure it was 5 or 6 or something, right? Well, anyway, we went to Poland. We were 35. I was 35, maybe 36, and we went to Poland. We were there for a couple months, and day one, man, I'll never forget. We were right. I didn't forget where we were. No, again, I know. I forget exactly where we were, but I remember it was day one. I think we were on the tram car, and I looked at some guy, and he had black shoes and white socks. And I looked at on the other side of the car, there's a guy with black shoes and white socks. And I was like, oh my God, that's where this comes from. And it was so crazy. I had never seen that. And it was so cool. It was so cool. I had such an appreciation for that, so-called stereotype come to life, right? All right, man. So Polish Chacha says, do you believe healthcare is a human right or a service rendered? Oh, man. Well, this is so complex, okay? There's certain, I don't believe in very many human rights at all. First off, let me just say that. What rights do I have? Right to air? Does it have to be clean air? And what constitutes clean air? A right to what? Water, fresh water? Like, why do I have a right to that? Like, what gives me a right to that? I live on a planet, and I choose to live somewhere because it's a choice, right? And like, why would I have a right to water, to air, to whatever I might have a right to? It just doesn't strike me as very. Yeah, it doesn't. Okay, so now that's me thinking in the most general of senses, right? So now I can think as a sociologist. It's like, well, we live in these communities, and in order for us to successfully live in these communities with other human beings, we have to establish that there are certain things that need to be primary givens, that services that we need to provide for members of the community. And if you provide for one, you got to provide for everyone. There have to be certain services that you provide for everybody in the community. Okay. Well, when does it go then from a service that is just provided because we've all collectively agreed that we should provide that service to something that's actually absolutely necessary because it's part of the human condition, meaning it's like a right, like a human right, like, like water or housing or something like that, basic meal every day. The problem once we launch into that world is like, it's just very, very complicated. What's the right then? The right to what, a bed? What kind of bed? What kind of medical care, right? Health care, huh? Like, well, what do we mean? Like a knee replacement? Is that it? Right? How about a successful amputation? Well, I get a successful amputation. Well, what kind of Band-Aid is used? One made from human tissue or one made from cloth? If I do the one from human tissue, my amputation can heal in a very short period of time. Like 20% of the length of time is with, manufactured bandages. So like, well, do I have a right for that? Because, that's a better way to do it. So like Medicare should pay whatever it is per square inch for human tissue bandage for that. It's just, you could fall in the space of saying like, wow, I don't know who, I could never decide what would be the human right of healthcare. Like how much healthcare, what kind, yeah. What kind of treatment? Man, I was reading something about somebody who their treatment cost $1 million. So they were fundraising. They couldn't get their insurance company to pay for it. And so they couldn't get a judge or someone to force the insurance company to pay for it. So they were doing fundraising for $1 million. But it wasn't for them. It was for their baby who was, 6 months old, I think, who probably the estimated length of time that this infant was going to live was only like 5 years or 6 years or something, right? Now the infant might live 50 or 60 years, but the point being, it's like, well, okay, why is it $1 million? Well, it's $1 million because people spend a ton of money. Okay, one thing is people spend a lot of money to do the research to be able to manufacture something, and they got to recoup their costs. That's a kind of a given. But then at what point do they recoup their costs? And then somebody else steps in, like the government or some agency or whatever, and say, okay, you got your money back now. Now we're going to lower the cost of this, right? Well, that happens, but I don't know how much money do they get to have, right? How much money do they recoup? And how much profit on top of the money that it costs to develop the drug? Like, these are all the things that are just like, wow, I don't know, man. So anyway, that's my thing right there. So in other words, no, healthcare by itself is not a human right. I suppose as a community, we could easily make the argument that, well, certain things should be a right. Like, you should have access if you're giving birth. If you want access to assistance, whether it's, a home healthcare doula or a home birth doula or a hospital, then I suppose that seems kind of like a right or something. But then what if your child needs an incubator for 3 months? Like, okay, hang on, is that a right? Well, yeah, the baby's born, so the baby needs to live. Like, okay, like, you see what I mean, right? It gets very, very complicated. And then when it just becomes services rendered, it's like, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense either, that we make it this kind of exchange for just, like for payment. I don't know. That doesn't feel, we're together. We're in this together collectively. So it seems to me that it doesn't make a lot of sense to just see healthcare, to have this inequity in healthcare. But at the same time, it's like, man, there's just a lot of healthcare that just feels like it's way over, it's over the top. The vast majority of healthcare services does not need to cost all of the incredible amount of money that we put into it, all the things. I just went, I don't know. I mean, I went to someone to look at my toe because we weren't certain that whether I had toe fungus. And I didn't think I did, but I don't know. I might have toe fungus, and I got to get on that right away, man. So, okay, I couldn't go see a podiatrist. I'm like, who's going to look at this? So I get online first. I'm like, well, I don't want anyone to look. I'm going to look at it. So I start looking at photos of toe fungus. Man, just couldn't figure it out. What it was. And my one toe on my one foot's a little bit sore when I walk in certain shoes. So I'm like, I think I might have the beginnings of arthritis on that toe. Let me see if there's something I could think about, if it's true, and if I could do something. So anyway, I can't go see somebody. I got to go see my primary care physician. So I'm like, oh God, I don't need to see my primary care physician, but I do. That ends up costing a lot of time and a lot of money. And like, okay, well, was kind of quite unimportant. But then I get the referral to go to the other person. So I go to the other person. And then, we do this and we do that. And they decide, yeah, it's probably not toe fungus. But yeah, it looks like you have the beginnings of a very little bit of arthritis. I'm like, yeah, is there anything I can do? No. It's like, which I kind of had the idea that was going to be the answer anyway. There's nothing I can do. Yeah, be careful about the shoes you wear. Don't aggravate it. There's certain things like that, right? Don't try not to walk on your toes. Don't run on your toes for sure if you're a jogger. All sorts of stuff, right? But anyway, all of that for a very simple thing. All I had to do was just walk. I don't need to sign these waivers. You don't need to take my blood pressure. You don't need this. You don't need that. You don't need me to like. Whatever it is, man, just like, here, look at my toe, man. It's like, boom, there, no, yes, okay, good, we're done. And so when I think about a healthcare service and I think about that kind of shit stuff happening around all over the place, and I think, well, we could design a system in which healthcare wasn't just a service, but it was a little bit more than that. And we could, or if it was a service, we could provide far more to people so that it was much more, it would appear in the way that it's delivered to human beings as a right than just something that they pay for. But we don't do that. And that's not the system that we have. And there's no perfect system. And I don't know how you'd ever, if I were king and had infinite amounts of money and in control, I don't know how I would ever design that system anyway. So the people wouldn't complain. People would complain anyway. I want more. I don't know what it would be. So it's like, So anyway, that's Polish cha-cha fishing, man. It's my long-winded answer to your question. Yeah. I hope that's satisfying. Yeah. Yeah, Matthew Campbell. Yeah, lay off it. The 65-inch TV is cheaper. Yeah, labor is cheaper, and also parts are cheaper. It's faster. With robotics putting a lot of stuff together. Parts are cheaper. We just keep finding people to places and people to produce it less and less expensively, and then manufacture it and like box it up and ship it around the world. And yeah, it's so many things, man. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty unfortunate. It's just, yeah. Okay, Jeff, is there anything else? Because if not, I will. We've been on for almost 2 hours, man. We could just move on. We'll be back. Polish cha-cha fishing, man, whatever that means. Thanks for your question. That was a really cool question. Nobody's ever asked me that. I've never thought about it, actually. I hear people talking about healthcare as a human right. And I'm like, I will think to myself, wait, what do they mean by that? And then I don't, because it would require me to go down a rabbit hole in my brain, I don't go very far. I just actually ask, what do they mean by that? I don't try to answer it, but now I actually was able to try to answer that. Yeah. Huh. Yeah.
There, hopefully you can hear me okay. There's one last question. How do you pick the volunteers? Is there a process that you go through? And then maybe you can say something about tomorrow's class, and then we'll be done.
Yeah. So people apply to volunteer. So they give me basic information about themselves, where they're from, the socioeconomic class standing of their primary family. Are they wealthy or, upper class, upper middle class, et cetera? How many countries they've lived in for longer than, like, say, 3 months? What their nationality is, how many languages they speak, their religion, whether their religion is important to them, something about their gender identity, if it has any importance to them. And then, something about their ancestry. Yeah. And then just something about themselves that stands out that I wouldn't know by, like looking, I wouldn't know, something could be like, it could be like I've 100% hearing loss in one ear, it's like, oh, whoa, all right, what's that about? Or I have 2 mothers or something, but anyway, so I just go down the list and pick someone who I think would fit with a certain kind of thing that we're working on a given day. In the end, I don't know much about them other than what they've told me. Or, again, one thing we're going to start to do is before class, I'm going to actually ask people, say, okay, here's the topic today. Who wants to volunteer? So I don't know what I'm doing. Tomorrow is on welfare, and I just really want to know what our students think about welfare. First off, what they think welfare is and what they think about it. Who's getting it, who deserves it, when do people not deserve it, when do they deserve it? Who are there certain people, certain groups more likely to receive welfare, and how do you think about that? And when's welfare good? When's it bad? And again, what is welfare? Was this something for poor people, or do rich people get welfare? Or is that welfare? And that kind of stuff, right? So I really want to start out with just like, when I say welfare, what do you think? Where's your mind go immediately? Just curiosity, man. I really have no idea. And again, the problem is, you only got, like, let's say I'll have 4 people up there. So I don't get, it's not by any way a random, it's a random sample, but it's not even, it's such a tiny sample, but at least it's something, So this would be one where probably, if I had to guess, 2 of the students everyone's going to be against welfare, just open welfare. Nobody's going to say, hey, yeah, if you need help from the government, you should get money. You should get help, period. Right? Whatever it is, you should get help. No one's going to say that. So even though people would identify themselves as, liberal, students are more inclined to be more liberal than conservative. When you actually ask them a question like that, they're going to be more conservative. They're going to be just like, wait a minute, hang on. We can't just be given the things, just this conservative way. Like this government should be as small as possible. We shouldn't have a big, huge pool of money that somebody decides who we're going to hand that out to, right? That's more of a conservative perspective. It's like, that's probably not a good way to organize a society. You should give as much to individual people and let them decide how they're going to control their own resources, right? That society is just much better when it's organized like that. Well, most students are going to, when you actually ask them, that's how they're more likely to come down. They will identify as more liberal. They want to fix the world, but they're not going to want to pay for it, right? So, but they haven't thought through that. So it's just kind of like I said, it's like, everybody wants stuff, but they don't necessarily want to pay for it. So, wait, and a lot of my students, the majority of students are either paying their own college, paying in loans, or they're working really hard to help make payments. So, their parents are paying half, they're paying half, kind of stuff, right? So they're not people are not all sitting in that classroom on mother and father's credit cards and paying their tuition bills. Don't worry about it, honey. Your mother and I will take care of that, or your father and I have got that. We'll take care of it. Don't you just go enjoy yourself. That's very few of the students in the class. Yeah. So anyway, so that's the welfare thing. So I think that's how it's going to pan out, but we'll see. So I'm really curious. Wait, was that so? The volunteers, right? So I haven't decided tomorrow. I might after this call send some text messages out to 4 students being like, hey, do you want to volunteer tomorrow? I may do that, or I might just wait till right before class and ask. I'll see. That's it, man. The question is US default. If you look outside, the result is to, yeah. All right. Hey, I had a turquoise turtle. I had a really nice birthday, actually. It was good. Crazy. Everywhere I went. Okay, so I turned 65 and I was in all these situations where I'm asking people, hey, do you have a senior discount? And they're like, no, we have a military discount. Like I went to a museum in Chicago and stuff. We have a military discount. I'm like, where's the senior discount? I've been waiting my whole damn life for the senior discount. And I finally arrived and I haven't gotten one yet. Well, I actually did at the golf course a couple of weeks ago. I wasn't even a senior yet, but they gave it to me. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, it was a good birthday and anniversary. My wife and I had our 32nd anniversary on September 4th. So it was nice. A nice meal. And yeah, it was good. Good times had by all, as they say. Yeah, it's very nice. Great weather and yeah. The Windy City. All right, listen. I think why don't we end right here, and then we'll be back on office hours on Wednesday. I have a couple of things to talk about. Maybe answer a few more questions, but Jeff, I think we're good, man. I'm looking forward to class tomorrow.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah. Isn't senior discount welfare? Wait, hang on. Is it welfare? Well, in a way, right? It's like, it's not welfare per se, but someone has to pay for it. But if the company would pay, well, it depends. If it's a government thing, if it's taxpayer funded, it's welfare, right? Yeah. So if this was a museum that was privately owned, so therefore, yeah, it wasn't really welfare. But the other museum, which was owned by the city of Chicago, if I would have gotten a discount there, well, I didn't go to that museum in the end, but they didn't have a discount anyway. But if they had, it would have been welfare on the part of the city of Chicago. Chicago taxpayers pay them, and state taxpayers would be funding that for me to get my $4 off admission to the to the museum. So yeah, that's welfare, man. That's the thing, man. It's all part of it, like, yeah. But at the golf club, it wasn't really welfare. It's a private golf club. So, all right, listen, man, let's go. Seriously. All right. Thanks, everybody. And be well. See you tomorrow. Some of you in class tomorrow.